So, where we left off there in the middle of Exodus chapter 1, the 70 people who went down into Egypt with Joseph have grown into a great nation over 400 years. This is despite the fact that they were slaves doing hard labor, working in the fields, making bricks, building military fortifications, storehouses, cities. The text even implies that the Egyptians worked them extra hard in the hopes of killing them off. They wanted them gone. There were too many of them. But the Hebrews just kept multiplying. So the Egyptians were in dread of the sons of Israel. The moral of the story is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When the Egyptians treat the Hebrews poorly, they make them enemies. They're digging their own grave. So the Egyptians, the Hebrews, they don't seem to be dying off no matter how hard they're worked. So Pharaoh quietly orders 2 midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill the Hebrew baby boys as they are born. And here we have the first heroes of the Exodus. The midwives quietly refuse to obey Pharaoh. Pharaoh then calls them in and accuses them. Why have you let the baby boys live? They reply, oh, the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They're strong. They deliver our babies before we can even get there. Pharaoh grumbles and dismisses them. They get back to work. They go on quietly saving lives. God was pleased with Shiphrah and Puah and blessed them. It is a deliberate irony of the book of Exodus that their names are recorded for posterity, while the name of Pharaoh is forgotten. Shiphrah and Puah remind us that when we are faced with a choice between following orders and doing what's right, we do what's right. Even if we stand alone, we do what's right. Even if our boss at work tells us to do something wrong, we do what's right. The Hebrew nation is still growing. So Pharaoh finally makes a public announcement, commands all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews shall be cast into the Nile. The irony is, Moses is going to be cast into the Nile, right into Pharaoh's very own family. Everything they do keeps backfiring.
2 midwives in the entire country?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I was thinking about that. Were there more midwives? We don't know. Are they just the 2 that are remembered? Maybe. Their names are Hebrew for what it's worth. Next we get the second hero of the Exodus, Jochebed, Moses' mother. She hid Moses for 3 months, the book of Hebrews tells us, because she trusted God to protect her and to protect her baby, and she was not afraid of Pharaoh. When she could hide him no longer, she came up with a plan. She put baby Moses in a basket on the Nile, thus obeying the letter, if not the spirit of the law, and sent her older daughter Miriam to follow that basket. The basket, by Jochebed's cunning and God's providence, sailed right on up to Pharaoh's daughter where she was bathing. Pharaoh's daughter took pity on the baby and wanted to keep him. Young Miriam walked right up to Pharaoh's daughter and asked, shall I get one of the Hebrew women to nurse him for you? And Pharaoh's daughter agrees. So Miriam comes right back with her mother, who is immediately hired as Moses' wet nurse. I have to admire the cunning of Jochebed. She is probably the only woman in history who managed to get paid for nursing her own kid. But around age 3, when Moses was weaned, he went to live full-time at the palace. Still, Jochebed trusts God with her son. Over and over again, she trusts God with her son and lets him go. She gives him to God, so God can do great things with him. Baby Moses in a basket looks back to Noah and forward to Jesus. Both Noah and baby Moses escape the waters of death and float to safety in a boat sealed with pitch and survive to become a savior of others. Both baby Moses and baby Jesus were condemned to die at birth in a massacre by an evil king who was afraid for his own power. Ironically, in both cases, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph find safety by fleeing to Egypt, while Moses and Jochebed find safety within Pharaoh's own family. That's all we know of Moses' childhood. Like Jesus, his childhood is obscure in the Bible. The next time we see Moses, he's all grown up. We're going to take a moment here to look at the character of Moses. The first time we see Moses as an adult, he is walking among the Hebrew slaves, breaking their backs in the hot sun, and his anger flares. And he thinks, this is not right. Moses' defining character trait is his passion for justice. He loves justice. He hates injustice. And he is willing to stand up and do something about it. What's his worst fault? His temper. His anger burns hot. It's something he always has to fight against. As he goes through life, we see he learns tremendous patience. Now, Moses' life, as I mentioned earlier, splits neatly into 3 periods of 40 years. And it's over this long period of time that God slowly forms him into a man he can use. For the first 40 years of his life, Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace. Being the son of Pharaoh's daughter, he would never have been in line to rule. But he was a prince of great wealth and power. At some point, he was probably given great responsibilities. We know he had tremendous leadership skills. Perhaps he governed a province, led an army, or oversaw one of Pharaoh's building projects. He acquired a little arrogance along the way, but he was always a man of boundless integrity. At the core of his being was still that passion for justice. So the book of Hebrews tells us he chose to give it all up. He gave up his wealth, his power, his position, his Egyptian family. He couldn't bear to be on the side of the oppressors. So he cast his lot with the Hebrews. At this point, nobody likes him. Not the Egyptians or the Hebrews. He doesn't belong in either world. For the second 40 years of his life, Moses is in exile in Midian. He's a lowly shepherd, son-in-law of a Midianite priest. He marries, has 2 sons, finds contentment in the simple life. He seems to have forgotten his grand ambitions to right the wrongs of the world. He learns the virtues of domestic life: hard work, caring for your family, humility. After 40 years of living and working in obscurity, God decides Moses is ready. When God meets Moses at the burning bush, Moses is more than humble. He's insecure. Who am I to go to Pharaoh? But over the course of the Exodus, Moses gains courage, tremendous resolution, tremendous trust in God. For the last 40 years of his life, when Moses is leading Israel through the wilderness, you get the sense that he is suffering for their salvation, that he carries his people's burdens on his own back, like Jesus carrying the wood of the cross. The people's constant disobedience and ingratitude and rebellion, it so often seems to be more than Moses can bear. So Moses looks to God continually. He keeps him close. Moses finds his strength in God. He learns patient endurance. And he teaches the people justice, always the passion of his life. He teaches them how to live rightly before God and with one another. And he becomes a great prophet, a great intercessor, a great leader.